right, guys, so now that we really understand how to add integers together, we're going to start moving on to something a little bit more tricky. We're going to be adding rational numbers. Now, remember, rational numbers include those integers, but it also includes fractions and decimals. So we'll probably have to do a little bit of review of how to add fractions to be able to understand this lesson correctly. So we're just going to go ahead and start off with that review. So adding fractions. The first rule is that you need to make sure that you have a common denominator. That's the number on the bottom of a fraction is the denominator. Remember, the top is numerator, bottom is denominator. So we have to have a common denominator, or the denominator needs to be the same. So let's practice doing that. If I have 3/4 plus 1/2, I cannot add it together the way it is. I first have to find a common denominator. And we do that by finding the least common multiple. So we're going to start by listing the multiples of 4. So we have 4, 8, let's see here, 4, 8, 12. And remember, I find the least common multiple by just multiplying whatever that denominator is by 1. So 1 times 4 is 4, 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 4 is 12. I don't think we're going to have to go up this high, so I'm going to stop here. And then I'm going to list the multiples of 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. And then as soon as I find one that matches on both of them, and it's the smallest one that matches, that is called my least common multiple. So in this case, my least common multiple is 4. So the trick now is that I need to make it so that both of my fractions have the denominator of 4. Well, I'm really lucky in this one because this one already has a denominator of 4. So for this one, I need to figure out how to change it to 4. I know that 2 times 2 equals 4, so I'm going to multiply that 2 by 2 so that I can have a 4 on bottom. Now, if I multiply the bottom by 2, I have to do the exact same thing as on the top to keep the fraction equivalent. Okay, so in the end, it has the same value. So I end up with 3/4 plus 2/4. Okay, the next step is I need to add the numerators together. Once again, the numerators are the numbers on the top. So I'm going to add 3 plus 2, and it's going to be 5. But what about this denominator? Do I add them together? No, not when you're adding or subtracting fractions. You keep that denominator the same. So 3 plus 2 equals 5. So when I add them together, my answer is 5/4. And then finally, I need to simplify. Just like everything with fractions, we always like to have it go down to its simplest form. In this case, we have an improper fraction. And so all I'm going to do is say, okay, well, how many times does 4 go into 5? Well, it goes in 1 time, right? 4 goes into 5 1 time. And then what do I have left over? So I do 5 minus 4 equals 1. Oops, there we go. So I have 1 left over. So 1 and 1. And then, of course, the denominator always stays the same in the problem. So when it's simplified, it equals 1 and 1/4. So that's basically how you add fractions together. So now that we've had that little review, we can move on and learn how to add rational numbers together. So we're going to have a couple of rules, and they're going to look very similar to when we're adding integers. The first one is, if two rational numbers have the same sign, then add and keep the common sign. Wow, that sounds really familiar. That's because it's the same as the rule for adding integers. So let's practice. If I have 1/3 plus 4/9, I know that they have the same sign. They're both positive. So I know in the end, my answer is going to be positive. But before I can add them, what do I have to do? I have to make sure that I have the same denominator. So in this case, the least common multiple would be 9, because I know 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9. And that's right here too. So I'm just going to times the top and the bottom by 3. Okay. All right. So you would end up with 3/9 plus 4/9. And then all you need to do is add those top numbers together, right? The numerators. 3 plus 4 equals 7. So I have 7. And then I keep the denominator the same, just like the rules we just practiced. So I end up with 7/9. Now, is it going to be positive or negative? Well, I just have to look and see what my signs were in the first place. Both my signs were positive, so my answer is positive. The answer is just 7/9. All right, so let's go ahead and practice with some decimals, because decimals are also rational numbers. So here I have negative 25 hundredths plus negative 1/10. So my signs are the same, which means I'm going to add them together. So I'm going to go ahead and write them out in this format so that I can add them together easily. So I'm going to have 25 hundredths and 1/10. Now notice I work really hard to make sure that my decimal points line up. That is very, very important. They must line up. See this empty spot here? If I end up with an empty spot with another number on top, I know I can fill that empty spot in with a 0, okay? As long as it's on this side of the decimal. So I add it together and I get 0 and 35 hundredths. So that is my answer. That is what I would put in the answer box, 0 and 35 hundredths. But I need to know if it's supposed to be positive or negative. So I'm going to look at, oops, my 5 is not fitting in the box. I'm going to look at my signs. Both of my signs were negative. Therefore, I know that my answer is also negative. So the answer is negative 35 hundredths. All right, so let's check what my next rule is. My second rule is, if the two rational numbers have opposite signs, then subtract and keep the sign of the integer with the highest absolute value. Once again, the same rules. So let's try some out. I have 1/3 plus negative 4/9. And I've already done the work over here, so I'm not going to walk you through it again, but I know that I end up with 3/9 plus negative 4/9. So then I'm going to just add the top two numbers, 3 plus negative 4. Well, I know if my signs are opposite, like these are, I'm going to subtract. So I have 4 minus 3 equals 1. So I know my answer is going to be 1, and we always keep the denominator the same. So I have 1/9. That 9 looks funny. Sorry, guys. Now, is it going to be positive or negative? Well, it's the same way as we learned in the other one. We just need to find out which one has a higher absolute value. So the absolute value of 3/9 is 3/9, and the absolute value of negative 4/9 is 4/9. Well, which one is bigger? Is 3 bigger or 4 bigger? We know 4 is. So then the answer is going to be negative 1/9. All right, and then it's the same idea with our decimals. I have negative 25 hundredths plus 1/10. So this time, instead of adding, I'm going to subtract, right? So I have 25 hundredths minus 0.01. Oops, I believe I said that wrong. It's really 25 hundredths minus 0.1. I added a 0 on the end just as a place value holder. Okay, so I have 5 minus 0 is 5. 2 minus 1 is 1. And then we have a 0 over here. So now all that's left is for me to determine if it's going to be positive or negative. So I need to find out which one has a higher absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 25 hundredths is 25 hundredths. And the absolute value of 1/10 is 1/10 or 10 hundredths. So then I just have to figure out which one's bigger. Is 25 or 10 bigger? Well, 25 is. So that means my answer will be negative 15 hundredths or 0.15. There you have it.